And the other thing is, don't be worried about using cheap plugins. Sometimes the cheap ones are far more savage and have more character. So certain things, the posh ones are a bit too subtle or a bit too nice. Sometimes you just need to EQ the hell out of it. So just whether you work in Logic, Cubase, some of the built-in Digi-Design ones, don't be frightened of using them. You know, some of them are really good. The Logic compressor, if you get into it and know what you're doing with it, you can get it to work really well, get you out of a lot of trouble. And maybe use it less on a lead vocal or something that's going to be really prominent. If I've got some good kit, the voice in pop music is the thing that's going to be the most heard. So I will give preference to the posh outboard gear for that. So if there's a Distressor or if there's a Pultec or a Fairchild or a Uri, then I'll try and use that.
And how would you record a vocal track?
How would I record a vocal?
Meaning compressor, you know.
I would generally record with a compressor that I knew, because I might not know the singer or know the track very well. So I'd want something that I know that I could set in a way that if the vocalist really started to hit it hard, wasn't going to squash in a way that it would be derogatory to the sound. So if there was a... Sorry? Not if I can help it, because obviously you're touching stuff and sometimes it can crackle, and if you're not paying attention, you're going to miss it. So I try and get it so it can look after itself. Not always possible, because yeah, you might get a singer that has a track that it really does go drastically. But in that case, then I'll err on the side of caution and under compress, and then look at it later. Or I would sometimes, because again, it might be hard for the singer to sing it like that, you might end up recording it in sections anyway, so you can adjust the settings. And as long as you always keep notes.
Is there anybody that doesn't compress the tape?
Probably. I mean, sometimes I don't. Yeah, no, definitely. It is automatic gain control. You know, that's what they do. I think some people are a bit... I think you get a lot of people that maybe don't know how the compressors work too well, so they're wary of doing it, so they maybe don't do it. And some people just don't like it. So, some people don't like to sing. Some love compression on their voice. Some like loads, but it's too much. It might be too much for what you want. So you have to set them one up on the monitor path so that they can sing with it, but it's not being recorded through that. Some people hate it. I work with a saxophone player, an American sax player called Kirk Whalum. He came over, and he was on tour with Whitney Houston, and he... the artist I was working with, this singer-songwriter, knew him, and he came in and played. And he's amazing. You mention him to any top sax player, and they go, oh my God, Kirk Whalum, he's like God out there. And he came in, and I just put the tiniest bit, because we were working on tape, I was worried about if he went really loud, it would distort. I put the subtlest amount on, and he blew a couple of notes to warm up, and he said, okay, I'm ready. He said, oh, just one thing. He said, would you mind just taking that compressor off before we start, because I just really don't like it. And it was so subtle, but he knew it changed his tone slightly. I was like, okay, yeah, fine. So I took it off. But so it depends on the situation. But you know, just because it's cheap doesn't mean that it won't be useful for something. You know, certain things, especially in dance music and stuff. I mean, the compressors in Reason, some of those you put loops through them, they sound amazing because they just scrunch everything up, and they sound great. But if outboard gear's there, I tend to try and use it. Certainly recording, I'll definitely record through it. The thing I find using outboard gear and mixing, and when I don't mix in the box, is fine for big. When you get a really big project where the budget isn't a problem, and the record company specifically want you to go into a commercial studio and do that, it's generally fine. I've had a few borderline ones where the budget's been quite tight, and they sort of say to me, would you prefer to mix it in the desk? And I say, yeah, I would, because we can get it to sound better, you know, and we can do this, and for this project, it would benefit from it. Not every project would, but for maybe a particular one, it would. And then we've gone in and done it, and then the record company have changed their mind on something. They've asked you to do something, and then you do it, and then they go, oh, actually, we think we want it like that. But then they suddenly realise they have to pay to go back into the studio, or if we've hired some equipment in, they have to hire that outboard equipment in again. And a lot of people get put off by that. So at least by doing it in the box, you know, you can recall it at any time, which sometimes is a good thing, sometimes is a bad thing. I find when you do a mix for a record company and it's in a studio, sometimes they're less likely to come, you know, sometimes they might come back and go, actually the vocal is just not loud enough. We want it louder. So you learn with hindsight. Whenever I'm in a big studio doing something, I'll always run a few versions with louder vocals, quieter vocals. If there's a prominent feature like a solo of some kind, I might have quite a louder one or something. But you know, sometimes they go, oh, I think the hi-hat might be a little bit loud or a little bit quiet. And then when they actually think about, well, it's going to cost us £2,000 to go back in and do that, they go, actually, it's not that loud, I can live with it. But when you mix in the box, my God, yeah, could we have one with the hi-hat a little bit louder? Okay. No, could we have one with the hi-hat sort of in between where it was and there? Or could we have one with this up and this down? And you're suddenly doing recalls left, right and centre, which is a bit annoying, because if they were paying to go back in the studio, they wouldn't do it. But because you're mixing in the box in your studio, they kind of expect it. It's become a bit of a bone of contention. A bit like stems. Everyone's become obsessed by stems. I don't know if you're familiar what stems are. When we're in a studio, what we might do is at the end of a mix, we run our stereo mix and our various versions. Then normally we run a totally instrumental mix, so it's just as the master coming through the desk without any vocals. Then we run one with no lead vocal but with all the backing vocals in. So if the artist gets asked to go and do a TV show where there's the facility to sing live but not play live, they've got a version with no lead vocal and they can sing along live to it, and it works perfectly. Then record companies started going, well, we might get a dance mix done. Can you do just an a cappella so that then we can send it to some guys and they'll take just the vocal and put some different beats underneath for a mix? You go, okay, fine, you do that. Now they've got this thing, can you run just a mix of just all the drums with all the effects and EQs, then one with just the bass, then one with just the keyboards, just the guitars. So they have these stems, which in some ways is okay, because then if someone goes, well, actually, all the keyboards are a bit loud, or there might only be a piano and a little other keyboard, they go, actually, the piano is a bit loud. Let's just put all the stems in the computer and just drop it down slightly. It saves them going back into a big studio. But it also means that they've got your work and your mix, and they could literally put the vocals up, down too much. They could EQ it, and it's a bit worrying sometimes, because if they ask you to do it, it's fine, because you'll do a good job and you know what you're doing. But sometimes, you know, they go and fiddle with it, and then you hear something, you go, hang on, I'm sure it wasn't like that when we left it. So, and mastering is the other thing that's quite important. When we finish making a record, it goes for mastering. You're familiar with mastering? What the process is? Everybody? So that you know, just to make all the tracks, and it can really help a record out. I mean, you can't save it. I know so many people that have gone, oh, I've got this mix and it's not very good, but it'll be all right when it's mastered. And you sort of listen and you think, well, no, it won't, because it's just a bad mix and the balance isn't right. And I think people sometimes get a bit disillusioned by that. But often, these guys, they're just dealing with stereo music all day long. They're dealing with matching tracks to other tracks. They're referencing material all the time. So sometimes you can give them a mix, and it might be a really good mix, and it might just be a little bit dull, or it might just have a little bit too much bottom end. And if they're a good mastering engineer and know what they're doing, they'll just do a few little tweaks, and it can just really bring it to life and make it sound great. So it's worth, if you're a producer, or if you're an artist, or even an engineer, try some mastering guys and find one that's really good. And when you do, it's worth building up a good relationship with him, because a good mastering engineer is worth his weight in gold, really. Do mastering? No, it doesn't really excite me. I find the fact that you're a bit limited in that you can EQ it or compress it, but the whole thing, I found it a bit boring. That was why when I started at Tennis and they asked me about that, I was kind of like, oh no, it doesn't seem. I'd much rather have, you can turn an individual drum or a guitar or do the whole thing, you know. But I do appreciate it is a talent, and it just doesn't appeal to me. And I think the guys that do it, I know some people that go, oh yeah, I do my own mastering and stuff, and it's a bit like, you can be okay at everything, but you can't be excellent at everything. So I think it's best left to the guys that can do it really well, and they do it really well because they've been doing it for years and years.